Guess it's just you, Abby.
Yeah, me too.
Just a day, guys. Just a good one.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. Do want to welcome all of our board members, advisory council members who are joining us, as well as our volunteers and our supporters. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We've got a lot to cover this morning with you. We're excited to do that. I do want to thank each of you for your investment, whichever form it may be, in our home repair program. It takes all of us to make our program happen. It truly is a group effort. We also appreciate very much you taking the time to sit and learn with us this morning. We, like I said, we have a lot to share. We want to really help you understand and see kind of from start to finish, what does it look like for a homeowner to get served, and for us to be able to have the joy of serving alongside a homeowner. So again, welcome you to have any conversations you'd like to have outside the deep dive, to answer your questions, get your feedback, or talk about the future of our programs. After today, if you have any questions, like Abby said, please use the chat box as we go, and then we'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So anytime you have a question as we're reviewing stuff, just open up the chat window, type it in there, and that way we can address it when we get to the Q&A section. I want to introduce our staff very briefly. They'll introduce themselves with their titles later on, but today you're going to hear from members of our both our operations team and our community engagement team. Those include Dale Stewart, our community engagement director, Nick Kulik, our operations director, Ashley Weekly, who is our office Wonder Woman, and you already heard from Abby Watson, who is our community engagement specialist. So I want to give a shout out to our sustaining sponsors. These are organizations each year who basically help give us the resources to repair at least one complete home every year. And so these are organizations that do a lot to support what we do. These are both some foundations, and then also some companies and some churches in the community that help make what we do possible. And so we thank each of them and recognize them for their commitment to affordable housing. So I want to give a little background as we go through this about how we got to where we are today. Where did all this come from? So we're going to start this story in 2012. Our organization goes back a little bit further than that, but we'll start it in 2012 because that's a good mark in time. So in 2012, we were a shoestring organization. We had a budget, I believe, of around $42,000 a year as an organization. We had a staff of 1.0 full-time equivalents, which essentially was 3 part-time people, each working enough hours to add up to 40 hours a week collectively. And in that year, we repaired 26 homes. And in repairing those homes, we only completed 26 projects. So we only completed 1 project per home that we served. And that was kind of what we did. And we continued that in 2013. In 2014, you can see that was kind of just our mode of operation. We would find one need that was needed at the home, and we would go repair that home, or do that repair project that was needed at the home. As we got into 2015, multiple things happened. One is that we realized that some of these homes that we're serving, to really get the home fully repaired, we need to do more than one project. We had a number of homeowners that we had served in the past who would call us back and ask for additional repairs. And we said, how do we start moving closer to getting this project or getting this home completely repaired, regardless of how many projects it takes to repair that home? And so that was one of the conversations we were having as we entered 2015. The other thing that we looked at as an organization, really leading up to 2015, is we're kind of doing this as a grassroots organization. We're mostly using volunteers. We have a shoestring staff, but we're seeing this need continue to grow. We're seeing more and more people call us every year that need help with this. And what we're not seeing in the community is any other organization that's stepping up to say, hey, we're gonna own this problem. We're gonna be the torchbearer for all the organizations that are doing any level of home repair to help make sure that owner-occupied homes are safe and healthy places for people to live. And so as an organization, we said, okay, we're going to step up and do that. We're not going to say we're the only group doing this, because we've got a lot of partners and a lot of great people who are doing this as well. But somebody's got to step up and say, hey, we're going to take this bull by the horns and run with it, and really try to make sure that this problem is getting addressed community-wide. And you can see that reflected in the numbers. Part of the reason I wanted to focus on the number of projects we're doing per year, not just the number of homes, is, we've grown from 26 homes a year to an average of around 160 homes for the past 4 years. But really the growth in projects, I think, tells a little bit better of a story of just how much growth we've had. Again, we did 26 home repair projects in 2012. In most recent years, again, 2020 was a little funky with COVID numbers, but in most recent years, we're repairing somewhere between 400 and 470, 490 projects a year that the organization's actually completed. In many ways, thanks to so many volunteers that are helping our organization do that. So you can see the growth there. You can see how quickly that's grown. And again, I mentioned volunteer support. We have in around 1,200 volunteers a year that in most normal years are volunteering with us, which we're very excited to have them along with us. But I also want to talk a little bit about our staff growth during that time. Again, I mentioned earlier in 2012, we had 1.0 FTEs. It's full-time equivalents. It's basically how many, based on how many hours people are working, what adds up to 40. So we had 40 hours a week worth of staff work getting done. And we could do 26 home repair projects a year at 26 homes. Today, right this moment, we have 8.5 full-time equivalents that spread out among 11 different employees. And we're actually in the hiring process for a few more people, which will actually bring us up to 10.5 full-time equivalents as an organization. And so growth from 2012 to 2021 is going from 1 FTE up to 10.5 FTEs, which we're excited about. We know that that's part of it. We've got to have staff to help lead the organization forward. But again, volunteers are still critical because they provide the manpower to do about half the projects that we were able to do in a year. So that's really important. Some of the milestones that we've achieved, you'll see two different numbers here. When we could actually gather together in person and have people this close together without masks, we were able to celebrate repairing our 1,000th home in the history of the organization. We repaired our first home in the upstate of South Carolina on January 27th, 2007. And last year hit a milestone of repairing our 1,000th home. Well, we didn't get to have quite the celebration a number of months later when we actually repaired our 1,100th home as well. We couldn't get people together quite this closely and have a pretty picture like this. But yes, last year we did repair our 1,100th home in the upstate. We've also, as of the end of last year, we've completed 2,524 home repair projects. And this year in 2021, we expect the number of homes repaired to exceed 1,300 this year. We also expect our project count to reach 3,000 completed projects by the end of the calendar year. And so that's just giving you a glimpse of the growth that we're having as well this year. We get asked a lot, where does our funding come from? Where does the revenue come from that we use to power the organization? Well, about 54% of our revenue, we're working on this year a $1.1 million operating budget. Our contract revenue, which comes from governmental and sub-governmental sources primarily, makes up about 54% of our revenue. Most of this revenue is exclusively for paying contractors or paying for the materials for projects. And so a lot of times these contract sources, they'll give us a little bit of money to help cover things like project management, case management, working with the homeowner on things. But most of those funds are actually dedicated primarily to the contractors and materials, which is why the other part of this pie is so important. About 17% of our funding comes from grants, about 16% from individuals, and then about 7%, 6% respectively from faith groups and business groups. That enables us to maintain our staffing levels and maintain funding for other projects that may not get covered by contract funders. And so it's really important that we have a balance there of where our funding is coming from. So that's a quick overview of the organization itself, of kind of where we've been, where we've come from, and what we have looking at. I'll talk a little bit more about the vision for looking ahead as we get towards the end of the presentation. But now I want to turn it over to Dale Stewart. She's our Community Engagement Director, to talk a little bit more about our homeowner personas and start getting into the details of how we go about actually serving each homeowner that we serve. So Dale, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. For the purposes of today's discussion, we wanted to frame up 3 different personas or potential clients that you might see on our waiting list. We have given each of these a name, and we have kind of done a composite of different kinds of clients that we have served through the years to get a personality here for Nick to work with in his discussion with you. So our first persona is Mr. Ed, who is from Pickens County. He is a veteran who is 68 years old, very engaged with his church, and needs a new roof, a ramp, and a walk-in shower to help him to age in place and stay at home, which we know is very important to many of our seniors. Then we have Ms. Blake, who is in Greenville County. She is a single mother of 1 child. She is living with a disability. And while previously she has been able to get up and down her stairs with some ease, her disability has progressed to the point that it has become unsafe for her. So Ms. Blake needs a ramp, and she is 38 years old. And then finally, we have Mr. and Mrs. Calvin, who live in the city of Greenville. They've been married for 26 years. He is 58 and she is 57. And they need a new roof, siding, and electrical upgrades in their home. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Kulik, who is our operations director, and he will tell you more about what happens next.
Hi there, I'm Nick. I am our operations director, and I organize everything that is homeowner facing and funding contract partner facing. So I have a wonderful team that helps me get there. It is not all me, that is for sure. This is our service area. We serve in 4 counties: Anderson, Greenville, Pickens, and Oconee counties. The next slide has a small snippet of the funding source document that we use to make sure everybody can be get approved for funding. So I want to start going through some of the different funding sources that we have individually. So these 6 items on this screen, I'll talk about each one of them a little bit briefly. These are the first 5 are contract sources that we have: Greenville County Redevelopment, City of Greenville, Greenville Housing Fund, Appalachian Council of Governments, and the Housing Trust Fund. Those are our main contracts that we have that we try to spend each year. They all follow the same funding cycle. Housing Trust Fund doesn't necessarily have an end date per se. They do have a contract cycle though. Everybody else has a hard end date of June 30th as far as when we need to spend our contract funds. So in June, when you see me going crazy and I'm pulling my hair out, that is why right there. So how it works with these funding sources is we apply to receive the grants, and we get to spend their money on the folks that need home repairs. I really like spending other people's money. It's fun. We do not get the funding up front. We get an allotment, and basically we do the work, and then we turn in for reimbursement for what we have done. Each one has its own rules, guidelines, restrictions, whatever you want to call it, as far as how the money can be spent. In fact, I could go on for a very long time, and I did during our rehearsal as far as what each rule for each funding source was, and I was told, no, you're not going to do that. So I'll go over the highlights of what some of these are. Every one of these funding sources is available in Greenville County. So we have a lot that we can do in Greenville with all of these. The City of Greenville's funding is specifically for used inside of the city, and GCRA is specifically used for outside of the city. They both use HUD dollars for the work that we do. And so that's the main difference between those two. The Greenville Housing Fund is city or county. It does not use HUD dollars or anything like that. Those 3 have different requirements, even things like insurance and the amount that the home is, the fair market value of the home and things like that. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at to make sure people are qualified for funding for these different contracts we have. Appalachian Council of Governments is a little different. We actually have funding with them in 3 different counties: Greenville, Pickens, and Oconee as well. Their funding is strictly for aging in place, minor home repairs, allowing seniors to stay in their homes, essentially. And then Housing Trust Fund is in all 4 counties that we serve. But they have a little bit stricter requirements for a lot of the things that they do. So income requirement is lower. The scope of work, we've limited it to just 3 items: rewiring a house, new heating and air, and new roof. You have to hire a contractor to do the work. So that's the big reason why. And then the contractors have strict restrictions on them as well. There's also a limit on how much we can spend per project for those, but it is usually much higher. And so that's why we try to tackle those bigger projects with that funding source. Most of the funders give us a little bit of money that allows us to do what we do. We call it an admin fee. It's a percentage or a flat fee based on the funding source. We do have one funding partner, Greenville County Redevelopment Authority, that's actually took that a step further, and they've devoted money to have a full-time staff member that is fully working in Greenville County only. That individual doesn't work in the city, doesn't work in other counties, only in the county of Greenville, and utilizes these other funding sources as well to do projects, on top of the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority's dollars that they give us to spend on projects. With all these restrictions that the different funding sources have, it can make it difficult for some people to be able to get assistance. And so when somebody doesn't qualify for any of these funding sources, that's when the sponsorships or unrestricted dollars come into play and allow us to do work on homes that may not necessarily qualify for these funding sources. So we really appreciate those sponsorships and unrestricted dollars. And then one of the biggest things is the income level for folks, and every funding source, including ourselves, has, sorry, I get distracted by the chats. The income, how we gauge that is area median income. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, what is area median income? It's a number that HUD helps dictate. They update it yearly. It's different by the county as far as how much each county's median income is. And it's basically, if you were to list out every individual, the person that's right smack dab in the middle based on family size, this is how much that person makes per year. And so we use the 80% level as far as saying who we will or won't serve. And that's the same as most of our funding sources. Housing Trust Fund is 50% of AMI. Appalachian Council of Governments actually uses the federal poverty level, and it's at 200% of the federal poverty level as far as their income limits. And so that's kind of how we judge, though, based on who we're willing to serve as well as who our funding sources are willing to serve. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, 74% of the families we served last year were at 50% or below of the AMI. And in Greenville County, that means that a family of 4 is only allowed to make $37,450. And that's not very much. If you're trying to support a family of 4 on that kind of income, it's hard enough just to live, let alone replace your roof or HVAC unit or things like that. So that's a little bit about our funding sources. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley now, talk about the application process and the beginning of the homeowner experience.
Can you hear me now? Yay! Okay, sorry. Like Chris said, my name is Ashley, and I am currently the office coordinator. I work closely with the homeowners to help them through the application process, and I also work with them to schedule the home visits. So the first and most important step in receiving help is knowing who to reach out to. So how do the homeowners know to reach out to Rebuild Upstate? It's very common for homeowners to reach out to us because they see a trailer sitting in a yard in the neighborhood or a sign in front of someone's house on a build day, or they receive information from 211 or another agency in the community. Sometimes they refer to us by a friend, caseworker, or church group. We do have a Facebook page, and there's also been some coverage on the news about projects that we've done, but I still find that word of mouth is the most common way that homeowners hear about us. The second most important step is to complete an application with us. Without completing an application, there's no way for us to know if we can assist them. And there's two ways to apply. They can apply online, as you can see on the slide, by visiting our website, rebuildupstate.org, and click on Need Help at the top right corner, and then scrolling down to click on Apply Online. The application form will pop up, as you'll see on the next slide, and the homeowner or the referring individual can start the application. Submitting the application online is the preferred method because it automatically populates into our waiting list. We know that not everyone has access to a computer or the internet, so an application can be requested by calling our helpline. This is a line dedicated to those needing to complete an application. When they call, they will be prompted to leave a message. We ask that they leave their name, phone number, and mailing address and specify, and we ask that they specify if they would like a phone call back or an application sent by mail. When they call the number, they will not be connected to a representative, and that's just because of the number of calls that we get requesting help. We just don't have the capacity to answer the amount of calls that we have coming in. And the application process can sometimes take 20 minutes or longer to go through. Once they leave a message, they're added to our list for us to either mail an application or have a volunteer call them back to take the application over the phone. We do always let our homeowners know that our waiting list is very long, and we try to connect them with or encourage them to connect with other organizations for assistance while they wait. Once the application is received, we are able to get a better understanding of the need and the funding that might be available. The application form filters into the waiting list and is then sorted by the date of the application and the priority score, which Nick will discuss in more detail in a minute. We recently decided to update our application in order to gather more efficient data for us to get accurate information we ask all of the homeowners to submit a new application. And in this new application, we changed the focus of the questions we were asking homeowners. And now we're able to provide we're able to provide an update within 24 hours and be more efficient when scheduling appointments based on the funding and volunteers that are available. With the old application questions, we had to manually search for information after an application was taken. Then, once we had all the information, we would move them to the waiting list. Now, when we ask those questions up front, and every application is submitted automatically. Some of the new questions focus more on the information that's needed to calculate the priority score, which, like I said, is calculated automatically, and the qualifications of each funding source that we use. This lets us know up front who may or may not qualify for certain funding. The new questions also focus more on homeowners' most critical repair needs. This helps us determine who to schedule based on the volunteer and funding availability. We also focus on household information, like how many people live in the home, what's the income of the household, ages of people living in the home, and are there any disabilities in the home. Some of the questions on our application may seem irrelevant or surprising to homeowners and volunteers taking applications, especially when we ask about homeowner information. Every question on the application has great importance, including questions that we ask about the household, because it's critical that we collect information on everyone living in the home. This information can affect the priority score or funding available for the applicant. The presence of children in the home is one of the factors that's calculated into the priority score. Knowing that household information gives us a better understanding of the needs and the urgency of repairs. We may also be able to refer them to other organizations based on the information. And of course, the repairs that are done on the home, they don't only affect the homeowner, they create a safe, warm, and dry environment for everyone living in the home. So that wraps up the application process. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Dale, our Community Engagement Director.
Thanks, Ashley. I just briefly wanted to cover some information about our waiting list. We know that at any given time, the average number of homeowners that are going to be on the list is 1,100. That seems like a tremendous number, especially when you take into consideration the number that we are currently able to repair over the course of a year. And of that list of 1,100, we know right now that 621 of these homeowners will qualify for some level of funding from one of the different funding sources that we have. For the folks that are not included in the 621, we are always looking for ways that we can find additional funding sources or other opportunities to be able to get the repairs made for them. And as Ashley was saying, with the recent update to our application, it has given us an opportunity to reach out to all of our homeowners, and it allows us to let them know that we have not forgotten about them. It allows us to make sure that if they've already had repairs, that they can be removed from the list, or if we need to change the repairs that they still need, we can update that. And so it's just a great touch point to be sure that we don't have folks on our list that no longer need our assistance and that all of their information is current and up to date. So I'll turn it back over to Nick.
I almost started talking while I was still on mute. Almost. All right. So talk a little bit about the next step of the process. So selecting homeowners. And Ashley does a lot of the legwork for this as far as sorting the waiting list and things like that, but I give her most of the direction on what I'm looking for. And so to I guess take a step back first. So 1,000 people on our waiting list. We've been averaging about 170 project or homes served a year. There's a lot of people on our waiting list that are not going to get served this year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But people are on the waiting list for a long time, and they can get frustrated, and then I can understand that. We as an organization can only do what we can do, and so we get a lot of homeowners who are a little bit frustrated why it's taking so long to serve them. And, staff can get frustrated with homeowners who are frustrated because they're calling, 10 times a day, things like that. But our board has set up these guidelines, these prioritization scores, so that we can try to ensure that the people who we're serving, the need of that person is the greatest. And so that's how the prioritization score is kind of set up. The other considerations that we think about when we're selecting homeowners is, are they approved for a funding source? What types of repairs are they requesting? And do we have volunteers in the area that can do the work that's being requested? And then we eventually schedule the visit to go look at the home. So to talk about the priority score a little bit, the board has created 4 programs for us to guide how we do work. The 4 programs are for accessibility and safety for disabilities, full home rehab and preservation, aging in place, and then weatherization. So each program has its own directives, things that we're asking about and looking to get the score that the board has set up for us to follow. So a lot of the questions for the program for accessibility and safety improvements have questions about disabilities. Things like transportation required to your medical appointments. Can you get in and out of the doorways? Those kinds of things. The top score that somebody in this program can get is an 11. The full home rehab and preservation program or home repairs program, its top score is 10. It asks questions like the presence of environmental hazards like mold or lead, asks about barriers to the exterior of the home, like a hole through your wall or roof. And we also prioritize homes that have children in the home, and that program. For the aging in place program, some of the questions are about age, and then also number of falls in the home. And then the top priority score for that program is 6. And our weatherization program has a lot to do with the cost of the repairs versus annual savings that that homeowner could have based on the repairs that we would do, as well as comparing that to their annual household income. And so that program has a max score of 5. So that's a little bit about the programs. We also have other things that are considered in the selection process. When we are looking at the funding sources that are available, will they qualify for the contract funds that we have? We have to spend those contracts, because if you don't spend it, we won't get it next year. And you know how that works. How long will the process take as far as getting the funding approved? Each source has a little different length of time that, from the time we submit it to the time they get approved. And, if I need something that's really fast, maybe we'll use some undesignated funds kind of thing. The types of repairs that they're requesting, it varies. Every home is needing different things. Different homeowners need different things. And so, just for example, we have about 30 walk-in showers already approved right now. We have about, of those 1,000 people on the list, at least half of them need a new roof, those kinds of things. So it just, we got to play the game of putting the puzzle together, which funding source and which, repair do we want to do. We also need to look at our volunteers and where they're located and what they can do. And so we've talked a lot of this year with COVID about what do we have volunteers do. And so we've started opening it up a little bit more, asking some groups to do maybe some more skilled type things. Also some roofs and some other things like that. So we're working towards more things done with volunteers. That's going to help us spread the dollars more, help serve more folks as well. And then when we go to schedule our visits, Ashley sets them up for us. She'll call, tell them what they need, and things like that. We have 2 different types of visits. We got the one where a project manager goes out and assesses the home, collects the information that we need to turn into our funding sources. And then we have a homeowner assessment visit, which is what Trey does. He is the AmeriCorps position that we have, and he'll go out and he'll assess holistically the person's situation, and then refer them to different agencies if they qualify for some other resources that they don't currently have. So typically we will call somebody 3 times, and if they haven't called us back, we'll remove them from the list at that point in time. So to talk a little bit about the 3 people that we've selected, as far as setting up, I'll just kind of go through each one and just kind of give you a scenario of how we got to where we're doing their next step, which is the PM visit. So we sort the waiting list, and we always sort it by priority score and then the timestamp of when they submitted their application. And so then we might filter it by certain things. So for Mr. Ed, here we sorted the waiting list for a volunteer group in particular. I needed a project for a group in Clemson. So we sorted it by the area around Clemson. We called several homeowners, and that's typical. You'll call them and they don't answer. So you move on to the next one until we finally get a hold of somebody, and we scheduled a visit with Mr. Ed. And on his application, he's got a score of 5 out of the 9. I didn't update those scores. That's actually this. Anyway, He's 68 years old. He's requesting a ramp, a roof, a walk-in shower, and he lives in Pickens County. And so immediately we're thinking, okay, Appalachian Council of Governments in Pickens County, they can pay for the roof in the cost share situation. They can definitely pay for the ramp, and they can help pay for the walk-in shower as well. But since it's, we got limitations, ACOG won't pay for all of that funding or all of those projects. So we'll look at doing the roof with Housing Trust Fund. Now, Mrs. Blake, she lives in Greenville County. Her priority score is a 6 out of 9. She's living with a disability. She also has a child in her home. She's just requesting a ramp, a safe way to get in and out of her home. And so she would be a good fit for GCRA. Because of her age, she doesn't qualify for the Appalachian Council of Governments, and she lives in the county. We have lots of volunteers in Greenville County. Always can use some more. And then Mr. and Mrs. Calvin, they live in the city of Greenville, so that's going to limit our funding a little to just the city. What they're requesting is a roof, siding, and electrical upgrade. So that's going to be a lot of funding needed to cover those projects. And so we likely won't be able to do anything with the Appalachian Council of Governments on that one, unless we cost share on some. Well, no, they're not over 60, so never mind. So the city has 2 different programs within its funding, up to $24,500 per home. So we should be able to do these 3 things with that funding source. And we would use volunteers to do the siding. We'd hire a contractor to do the electrical, and depending on the roof, maybe we'd do a group, maybe we'd hire a contractor. We'd have to look at it when we're there. So once these visits are set up, our project managers do a little bit of paperwork beforehand. Still, we have to pull the property reports of each property, make sure their taxes are paid, the fair market values within limits of our funding guidelines. We look at the waiting list and see, are they a veteran? We look up sex offender status. That's something we will not bring a volunteer group into a house that has a known sex offender registered there. And then we call the homeowner. Ashley's already set up like a time slot of 8 to 12. So we usually call them, and after we've kind of scheduled it out our day, we'll call them and say, hey, we're going to be there around 8:30. And then the next one would be 9:30, and the next one 10:30, that kind of thing, so that we're letting them know when closer to time. My biggest pet peeve with Charter is, they'll give you a whole day, or somebody like Charter, they'll give you a whole day that you have to sit around your house and wait for them to come out to your home. So I don't like that. Everybody probably doesn't like that. We don't want to do that to the homeowners that we're serving. So once a home is selected, then we do our project visits. And so going into the details on the project visits, when we get out there, we're looking at the repairs that are needed. We're collecting the documentation that's needed for the different funding sources. So we're collecting IDs and proof of income and homeowners insurance and things like that from the homeowners. We're talking to the homeowners about what is their priority as far as what gets completed, as well as looking at things that they may not see about their home that needs to be repaired. We're trying to figure out what is it that we're going to do to this home that would fix the problem that the homeowner has. And then we take a ton of pictures of everything that we do. We have a survey that we do. We might do some little drawings of what's going on out there, or how we want the ramp to go, things like that. And we take measurements of all the stuff that we're going to try to work on. So if we're looking at Mr. Ed, I'll just kind of walk through a scenario, each one of these homeowners, what we're doing. So I walk up to Mr. Ed. He's got a mobile home. It looks older. It's sitting about 4 feet off the ground on the side of the house I'm on, but the yard's sloped, so the backyard is a little lower. The steps to get up to his home are in really bad shape. I'm a little nervous. I'm a big guy walking up these stairs. I might fall. So got to be careful as we're going in. He lets me in. We go and sit down at his dining room table. He's using a walker to get around and having a pretty hard time. He's moving pretty slow. And I look around the house, I can see the water stains on his ceiling. And then we start to go over the paperwork. So his mobile home is 30 years old. That automatically tells me I can't use housing trust fund to fix his roof. They don't allow mobile homes that are over 30 years old or over 20 years old. He wants the ramp out the front door to go down to where he parks. At that height, 48 inches, it's nearly 50 feet of ramp. For every inch up and down you go, you have to go out 1 feet. And so because of that, we can't likely do the ramp and the walk-in shower both, because that's a decent sized ramp and would require a lot of money. So I asked the homeowner, which would you rather have done? Well, he takes me to go look at his tub. He's got a garden tub that he can't really get in and out of anymore. And he has one of those small, 3 feet by 3 feet walk-in showers. And it's a little small for him. And so he would like for us to take the garden tub out and install a walk-in shower in that area. He says his main priority is doing the ramp so that he has a safe way to get in and out of the house. He can make do with the shower he has for now. So do the measurements, take the pictures, and then I move on to my next visit. And so I go visit Miss Blake. I walk up to a stick-built house. It's got brick siding. Looks like it's well taken care of. And Miss Blake, she brings me into the living room, and we sit down. I sit down on the couch, and she's in her wheelchair. I can see her son at the dining room table. He's eating breakfast. She tells me how she used to be able to get by going up and down the stairs, but that her disability has progressed and she is never going to be able to walk again. And so she is in her wheelchair. She needs a ramp to get in and out. And so we do the paperwork and other things. And then I go out and I look at the ramp, and it won't be that big. And so after analyzing all the things that I've collected, she's not over 60, so no ACOG for that. She lives in Greenville County, so we're going to use GCRA because she visits she meets all the other requirements for GCRA. And then I go over to Mr. and Mrs. Calvin's home. They live in the city. As I walk up to the home, I see that the house has several issues that need to be addressed. The old wood siding is coming off in several places. It's rotten in many others. The roof has a tarp over a portion of it and needs to be replaced. The whole thing is pretty old. I can see an old meter box on the outside of the home just around the corner as I'm walking up. And then I go into the house and we sit down at their dining room table. They tell me about how they have to put buckets out to catch the water when it rains, even with the tarp over the roof. Their wiring is original to the home, and sometimes it flickers when they do the laundry or cook on the stove. Looking around the inside of the house, it's well kept, other than where the water's coming through and things like that. There's not a whole lot of issues with the plumbing or anything like that. And so looking at the things they've requested, the siding, the rewire of the house, and the new roof, I think this is a perfect fit for the City of Greenville funding, and it should be able to take care of all of the items that are on their list. And so we go back to the office. We do a bunch of things paperwork-wise, calculate the AMI, fill out all my many spreadsheets that I use to track everything. Everybody makes fun of me because I got 100 spreadsheets that I keep track of everything on, which helps me stay organized. Otherwise, I'd lose my mind. We create a build day synopsis for any volunteer projects that we're going to do. That's the information that we share with our groups on Golden. Make sure everything's loaded up to Drive, and then we request the funding, and then we wait. And so there's typically a 1 to 3 month waiting process to hear back on approval from the different contract grantors. So we've got to plan these visits out ahead of time before we're wanting to actually do the work and stuff like that. So try to keep as many already approved for each funding source from each type of project and things like that, so that we're not scrambling to try to find a project for a particular need we want to fill. Once they get approved, then we make sure they get approved for all funding sources. So like for Mr. Ed, I didn't submit for Housing Trust Fund, but I probably would have waited until we could do the Housing Trust Fund. if I was going to do something inside the house, since we're doing the ramp, I could do the ramp and the roof differently, but he didn't qualify for Housing Trust Fund. And so we're just going to, once he gets approved by ACOG, we're going to go ahead and start working on trying to get his ramp ready. We get some designs made. We have a volunteer that does some design work for us. We could always use some more volunteers to help us design our ramps or decks. We do make a materials list, and then we order the materials, schedule the project with the group. If it's contractor stuff, we get bids on the projects that need contractors. Can we switch to the next slide? Sorry. And then certain funding sources require lead-based paint inspections. So we would get that done as well. So then, now that it's approved, the next step is the build day and beyond. So looking at the build days, here's, the process for that build day. We make sure the materials got delivered correctly. We set up the site, we drop off a trailer. On the build day, every build day, we have a safety moment at the beginning. We're having paperwork signed. Right now, we're going over our COVID guidelines and things like that. We're discussing what we're going to do today for each homeowner, and then we go do it. And if it's a contractor we're hiring, then we've hired the contractor to go do what they do. So for each of our personas, we're looking at Mr. Ed. Unfortunately, it rained the first day we went out to try to do the project, so we didn't get very far. We canceled, we rescheduled. We had a smaller group on the second day. They didn't quite finish the project, and so we brought our handyman club out the following Monday to finish the ramp for Mr. Ed. That is something that happens on a regular basis. It's a moving target sometimes, trying to get everything set up. Weather's unpredictable. The number of volunteers in the group is sometimes unpredictable. We do the best we can communicating with groups. How many volunteers do you have? And things like that. We now have a sign-up process online so that we can see that and things like that. All right, so Mrs. Blake, we go out to build her ramp. Everything works smoothly the first time around. Group showed up with the right number of volunteers. All the materials were delivered. We build the ramp one day, we're done. All right, and so then for Mr. and Mrs. Calvin, we had two different things we were going to do. We had the siding. We ended up adding some windows to the project. I missed that in my notes earlier. We had a group come out. It was a spring break camp. They came out, they did the windows, they did the siding all in 3 days on their camp. And then we had a contractor come out, they did the roof. Another contractor came out and did the electrical, and we got everything done for Mr. and Mrs. Calvin. Now, the bottom line here is that Mr. Ed, Miss Blake, Mr. and Mrs. Calvin, they have a safer home to live in for a long period of time. I'd like to try to do more for Mr. Ed. Some of that unrestricted funding could help us fix his roof possibly. We'll look at trying to do that when we can get to doing that. Once all the projects are completed at a home, we have the homeowners sign off on some paperwork. We do an after survey, we do pictures, we pick up all our tools, the trailers, signs. We have all our inspections completed if they're required. The staff inspects it. We're going to look at it and make sure it's done right before we send it to local inspection. And then Housing Trust Fund has their own inspector that comes out and checks it as well. Make sure all the receipts from the job are tracked properly. We turn in all our paperwork to the funding sources that they have. Each one has different requirements afterwards, what we have to turn in. And then Nick updates all his spreadsheets again. After we submit that, we do have things that we do down the road. Does the homeowner need to reapply, or more repairs needed? In Mr. Ed's case, yeah, we still have a walk-in shower we want to try to do for him, and he also needs that roof fixed. So he's going to stay on the waiting list, and we're going to try to help him as soon as we can with those other things. Miss Blake, she can receive other repairs in the future, and she can reapply at any point whenever she wants. Mr. and Mrs. Calvin, they got a full home rehab. So our new guidelines say that they need to wait 10 years before we will allow them to apply again. And so we're working on figuring out how to manage that part of it. Some of our major updates, major process updates, COVID-19 was a big thing this last year, right? I mean, it shut us down for a good month trying to figure out what do we do. It's not safe for anybody to go anywhere. So we slowly started using staff members to do some of the projects. Greg and I were in many, many homes during that time period. We do 2, maybe 3 projects a week, a lot of inside stuff. We kind of shifted gears on what we were going to focus on. Greg and I can't build a full ramp by ourselves. So we knew that at some point we would have volunteers back out. We did visit some ramps. And so that guessing game was a little difficult. When are we going to be able to do what, and who's going to want to do what, and things like that. So the cost of materials went through the roof. Treated lumber was hard to find anywhere, let alone for a reasonable price. So we did have one location that still had all the treated lumber that we needed to continue building ramps, and now your Lowe's and your Home Depots are pretty much back to where they were before. So we got a few grants. We added another trailer. We added some tools to the trailer. We added cleaning procedures for all the tools in the trailer and things like that. On a regular basis, we're cleaning things. When we're out on site, when you're done with the tool, you clean it right away so that if somebody else needs to use it, it's clean. We got a huge shipment from FEMA of hand sanitizer and face masks. And we spent, actually, the conference room still has a little bit left. So if anybody needs some hand sanitizer or masks, we still got a little bit left. But we distributed that, and it took us a while to get to where we're at still. We require masks on site, in the office, things like that. So masks, everybody knows they're not the funnest thing to wear, but it's keeping people safe, so it's important to do. And we limited our activities inside of the home. Only small groups for a long time. We're trying to work on moving some larger groups back inside the home if they're willing, if the homeowner is willing, to do some floor activities, windows, and things like that. So we had a lot of staff growth. We added a position to focus on Greenville County. We added some admin responsibilities for the operation side of things, and grew Ashley's position. She truly is a superwoman. We added a COO, and Dave is onboarding and getting his feet wet, and it will help us tremendously. And we're looking to grow in Anderson at this point in time. So we have 2 open positions right now, one for a community engagement specialist that will run a RSVP program that we recently got. We're also looking for a home repair coordinator whose focus will be actually in Greenville. We're going to transition Greg to Anderson County focus. And so that's some of the changes we're making with staff in this last year. And then we switched completely to digital process. Basically, we got some iPads with a grant. So we've got no more, well, I say no more, I still have some paper folders in here from before COVID hit, but we're basically using iPads for all our home visits, got mobile hotspots. We had to work remotely. We needed some new computers that would allow us to do that. So a lot of us got new laptops and things like that. And some of those COVID grants helped us get to where we are today. So I will pass it back to Chris now and allow him to finish this thing up.
Thanks, Nick. So in review, I just wanted to go over a few quick numbers really quick. Abby, if you can go ahead to the next slide. So in terms of where we're going in the future, kind of really setting the tone for the need that exists in the communities that we serve. So I've been searching for most of the past 15 years to really understand exactly how many homes in our community are in need of repair. That's a number that we've never been able to find. There are things like the census asks a question of, do you have an adequate kitchen? I know some people that if they don't have granite countertops, they don't consider it an adequate kitchen for themselves. There are other people, I was probably one of these in college who considered a hot plate and a microwave to be an adequate kitchen facility. So there just hasn't been a lot of data about this. Well, fortunately, last year, the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia came out with a really amazing study at looking at the 80 million owner-occupied homes in America. And what they found in this study is that approximately 6.6 million homes in America are owner-occupied and in a state of disrepair, meaning they need some level of repair work. Now, the unfortunate part about the survey is that they weren't able to do this regionally or even locally. It's a national statistic. But if we take that study and that assessment of how many homes are in repair, we looked at how many homes are owner occupied in the 4 counties that we're serving in. And long story short, there are approximately 22,166 homes in the 4 counties we serve that are owner occupied and in a state of disrepair, meaning they're unsafe and they're unhealthy for the homeowners living inside. And that's 22,000. They're just shy of 269,000 owner occupied homes in the 4 counties we serve. So what that means for us is that's a huge number. And if we're only repairing an average of 160 homes a year, we're not even making a dent in that number. And so as an organization, we're really looking to continue growing. And we've got to grow because one of our main goals over the next 10 years is we want to start making a statistical difference in this number. We want to actually get to the point where not only are we keeping up with the homes that are getting added to this list every year that are in a state of disrepair, but we actually get to a point where we're reducing this number, where we find that the next time this study's done, if it's done locally, there are only 21,000 owner-occupied homes in disrepair. Maybe we can get it down to 20,000, under 20,000. We want to start eating away at this number, but to do that, we've got to grow. And so that process that we just talked about, obviously, it takes a lot of manpower, a lot of effort to manage just the 1,100 homes that we know of right now that are currently on our waiting list or in some way, shape, or form on that list. There are a lot more out there beyond that waiting list that need more help, that need help that we don't even know of right now. And so as we look forward as an organization, we've got to grow to make sure that process can replicate more and more. We can really scale this process where we're not just repairing 160 homes a year, but we're repairing 200 homes a year. We're repairing 300 homes a year and really pushing that number forward to repair even more. So that's just a little bit of background about, or a little bit of future casting of where we're looking to go in the next number of years, and really why we're looking to grow. It's not just growth for the sake of growth. It's not just growth because we want to do more. It's really looking at this big picture number that we finally got access to know roughly how many homes are actually in disrepair, how many families are living in unsafe, unhealthy conditions. It's a huge number. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of partnerships and a lot of support from the community to make this happen. But we want to start eating away at this number, and that's really where we're headed as an organization in the years to come. So with that being said, I think I'm turning it back over to Abby, who's going to help guide us through some Q&A.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nick, Ashley, and Dale, all for sharing your perspectives. And thank you, everyone, for attending today so that you can learn more about what a homeowner experiences. And so I've stopped our screen sharing so we can have a little bit more of a roundtable style here. And what I'd invite you to do for the next, we've blocked out the next 30 minutes for questions. I know some of you might have appointments after this, so we'll try and include some answers to questions and some follow-up emails so you don't miss anything. But if you can't stick around and submit your question in the chat, and then I will present questions to our staff panel and they will answer that for you. So we did have a couple that were asked during the presentation. And so this first one here is for Chris. about our history. And Dawn asks, what has been the enabler for such a huge jump in number of the homes and projects completed? Chris, if we're looking at 2014 to 2015, could you answer that for Dawn?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what really enabled the jump in the number of projects and the number of homes? Going back to those numbers, we went from 26 homes to averaging about 160 homes a year. A lot of that was really figuring out a system for organizing ourselves. That was one of the key components of that. We typically back in the day, in the early days of the organization, we had a staff person on every single site that we were working on. We were limited to where that one staff person could be in any given point in time, and so we were only able to repair a certain number of homes with that one staff person being on site. When Nick first came on board, I remember one of the first things I told him was, Nick, you're probably going to pick up a hammer for every now and then, but really, I want you to focus your job on never picking up a hammer again. I want you to teach other people and enable them to do the work that typically a staff person had been doing in the organization. How can we develop volunteers who can go out and actually lead the work site, so we can have more than one work site per day that are in the community? And so that's one of the key pieces that we looked at is just really volunteer enablement. Helping to make sure that we can enable volunteers in our organization to lead sites, to assess sites, to help make plans for projects that we have coming up, and really engaging volunteers throughout the organization, because we are very limited in how many staff we can add. But we don't tend to find many limits in how many volunteers we can add, particularly that can help with tasks like that. The other driver that really helped move us forward is community funding. We had a lot of funders that stepped up and said, hey, we want to help make sure that this work continues, that we can grow this work. That came on board and said, let's help make this happen. And so we had a lot of funders jump on board and help us move this forward. Those two components together really were kind of the fuel behind the fire that led our growth up to this point.
Thank you, Chris. And these next questions are a little combo for Nick. The first question, Nick, would be to define a contract funder. And then a specific question about Anderson County. Is it true that only 2 of our 6 contract funding sources apply to Anderson? And you're muted, Nick, if you'll unmute yourself.
I did it that time. It got me. All right. So a contract funder, I hope I explained it well earlier. But basically we've requested from certain agencies, like the 5 that I mentioned, to spend some of their dollars. And so we've set up a contract with them, and therefore we call them contract funders. We do have in Anderson County some smaller contracts. They're just not as large as those 5 that we had talked about. So with Anderson County, we get about $5,000. We'd like for that to grow a lot. So talk to your local government officials and tell them that they need to support Rebuild Upstate. We have the RSVP program, which is something new that enables us to engage volunteers that are over 55 years old, and it comes with a little bit of funding to help pay for projects there. We are also constantly trying to find new funding sources in Anderson County to serve more there. So we have our Anderson Fund that specifically undesignated funds to us for Anderson County only. And so we can serve a couple homes with that. This last year we had some funding. I apologize, I don't even know what it stands for anymore. HAC grant. It was about $30,000 this last year that we did with that grant.
And Nick, I see Dale, I think she's unmuted herself, maybe to touch on some of those
Sure.
grant funding sources.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure and let folks know that we are traditionally funded by the United Way of Anderson County as well.
Yeah.
I would say let me just kind of summarize a little bit. Yes, we are limited in certain counties with the number of funding sources we have available. And that's really one of the goals that we have for the upcoming years is how can we try to balance that out a little bit more in each county. I want to go ahead and address one of the other questions that's on here that's kind of related. The question was, out of the 1,100 homes on the waiting list, are you able to determine for a particular county, perhaps Anderson, in terms of areas where there's the most need, to potentially develop more contract funding sources? So traditionally with our waiting list, I'll kind of divide the 4 counties up somewhat. This is just a good illustration. It's not exact, but it's roughly half of the population in these counties that we serve is in Greenville County. About 25% of the population across all 4 counties is in Anderson County, and then the last 25% is split between Oconee and Pickens counties. And so if you kind of just look at those 4 counties we serve, that's roughly the population distribution. Historically, our waiting list has really followed those numbers as well. We tend to find about roughly half of our waiting list is in Greenville County. About 25% of our waiting list is in Anderson County. Another 25% is split between Oconee and Pickens counties. And obviously that changes a little bit, and there are nuances in that from month to month. But historically, that's what we've seen. There's some counties that have had existing programs in doing home repair that it's made partnerships a lot easier to come by. Whereas other counties, primarily Anderson, Oconee, and Pickens counties, have not had countywide or even municipal programs focused on home repair. And so it's proving a little bit more of a challenge to kind of get those kind of started up within those counties, working with the government officials to be able to pull down some contract funds. That's been a little bit more of a challenge in those areas. And so we're actively working on that. It's just because there weren't pre-existing programs already there with those municipalities. It's a little bit higher of a hill to climb than it was in Greenville County.
And Kathy, I would love to talk to you more about that sometime.
And I'm seeing just one more, a couple questions here about volunteerism. Jim is with us. He's a group coordinator for a volunteer team from Elevation and wants to give a shout out. They've got a project coming up soon. Thanks for attending, Jim. And then we've got one volunteer question from Dawn, but I encourage you, we've got about 20 minutes still here. If you've got a question about a homeowner experience, go ahead and put that in the chat. And while you're doing that, we'll answer Dawn's question. Does work ever not get done due to lack of local volunteers? And that's a great question. So to touch on Nick's portion of the slides there about the build days, he mentioned, volunteer availability and then the type of repair. Those two kind of go together. So we have group projects that are appropriate for different skill levels. Currently at the beginning skill level, we have not run out of volunteers. We in fact have so many amazing groups in the community that want to connect and want to serve at that beginning level. So we never run out of beginning projects. That could be a ramp. When we go inside again, that could be flooring and windows. All of those are great for groups. We could always use a few more skilled groups, groups who are able to do some of those higher skilled repairs inside. And I do want to give a shout out today. I see we have a couple of individuals here from our handyman club, and they volunteer on our weekdays and do highly skilled repairs inside. So thanks to our handyman club members for joining us this morning too. And I am not seeing any questions in the chat. Nick, Ashley, Chris, or Dale, anything that you would like to add that you think would help our attendees today understand our homeowner experience?
I would just say thank you so much to everybody who joined us today to learn more about the homeowner experience. And certainly if you ever have any questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us and ask. One of our fundamental beliefs is transparency is key. There's not much in Rebuild Upstate other than, we typically don't broadcast specific homeowner information just at respecting the privacy of the homeowners that we serve. But otherwise, we try to be as open book of a book as possible. And so, we've done a lot over the past few years to try to update even this experience on our website to help make it more clear, both to volunteers as well as to homeowners, kind of how this process works. And so certainly if you have any suggestions of how we can make this more accessible to people and really kind of explain how this process works, we're all ears. Likewise, if you want to learn more about it, we're happy to share more with you. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Again, just to echo Chris, we really appreciate your time and everything you do for Rebuild Upstate and homeowners outside of today. So thank you all so much, and you'll get a recording of this as soon as it's available. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.